The night was quiet. The air on the strange planet was heavy and cold. A single man sat near a small fire, his face glowing in the light of the flames. He was not from this world. He was human, a traveler, far from home. Around him stood tall, black rocks, sharp like broken glass. Strange blue plants grew from the ground, shining softly in the dark. The place felt empty, but not safe. The man listened carefully. Every sound seemed louder in the silence, the crack of the firewood, the slow whisper of the wind. He looked around again. The night sky above him was filled with stars, thousands of them, but they gave no comfort. This world was not his, and he knew he had to be careful. He checked his supplies. A small bag of food, water, and tools lay beside him. It was all he had left to survive. He had walked 4 days across deserts of red dust and broken ruins. His journey was long, and every piece of food was important. Suddenly, he felt something. Not with his eyes, but with his skin. A movement, a shadow. Something was watching him. He froze. The fire crackled. He turned his head slowly, but there was nothing. Only darkness between the rocks. His heart beat faster than it happened. The sound was soft, but sharp. A quick step. A small body moving fast. He looked at his bag. The bag was open. A hand thin, quick, and not human, snatched a piece of food. Before he could react, the shadow ran. The man jumped to his feet. His eyes followed the little figure rushing away into the dark. It was small, no bigger than a child. Its skin glowed faintly under the starlight, pale and strange. The creature's movements were weak but desperate. His food, the last of it, gone. The man felt anger rise, but also curiosity. Why would a child be here? This planet was empty, dead. He had not seen anyone alive for days. And yet, this small alien child appeared, stealing food. He picked up his torchlight and ran after. The figure, his boots hit the ground hard, kicking up dust. The blue plants bent as he passed. The shadow was fast but stumbled often. It was clear the child was weak, hungry, desperate. The chase pulled him deeper into the strange land. The rocks grew taller, forming walls like a maze. His light flickered across the stones, showing strange markings, symbols from a lost people. The child disappeared for a second, then appeared again. Looking back with wide, glowing eyes, fear, panic. The man slowed for a moment. Something inside him shifted. This was not just a thief. This was a starving creature, alone and afraid. But he kept following. He had to know. The sound of small feet echoed through the dark path. The child turned sharply and entered a narrow passage between 2 rocks. The man followed, his breath heavy, his torchlight shaking. Then, silence. The child was gone. The man stopped. He looked around carefully. The night air was colder here, sharper. The only sound was the beating of his own heart. He pointed his torch into the darkness, but saw nothing. Then he noticed something. Footprints, small, thin, pressed deep into the dust. They led forward into a dark opening, a cave hidden between the rocks. The man stood still, thinking. He entered. There was no turning back. It could be dangerous. But his food was inside, and his answers too. He tightened his grip on the torch. His eyes narrowed. Slowly, step by step, he moved forward. The cave swallowed him, and the light of his fire was left behind. The passage smelled of damp stone. Water dripped from the ceiling. Strange moss glowed faintly on the walls, giving the cave an eerie green light. The footprints continued deeper inside. The man's mind raced. Why would a child hide here? Was someone waiting inside? Was it a trap? He stopped again. In the silence, he thought he heard something. A cough. A weak, painful cough. Then a soft voice, almost like a whisper. Not the child's voice. Oh, someone older. Someone weak. The man felt a chill run down his spine. The alien child had not stolen food for himself. He had stolen it for someone else. The man stood in the cave entrance. Frozen, his torchlight flickered against the walls. Somewhere ahead, in the dark, 2 lives were hiding. 2 lives that should not exist on this dead world. He took a deep breath. His adventure had only begun. The cave swallowed the man's light as he stepped inside. The sound of his own footsteps echoed back to him, bouncing from the wet stone walls. The glowing moss gave the place a faint green light, but it was not enough to see clearly. He lifted his torch higher, the beam cutting through the darkness. The footprints were still there. Small, light, pressed deep into the damp floor. Alien child had come this way. The man moved carefully, listening for any sound. Then he heard it. A scuffle of small feet, a gasp of breath. The child was not far. The man's heart raced. He began to walk faster, his boots splashing in shallow pools of water. His torchlight flashed across broken rocks and jagged walls. The air smelled strange old. Dust mixed with a bitter scent, almost like ash. Ahead, he caught sight of movement. A small figure, thin and glowing faintly under the light, darted around a corner. The chase began. The man quickened his pace. His torchlight shook wildly as he ran. The sound of his boots grew louder, crashing against stone. The child's feet pattered in front of him, quick but clumsy. The alien was small, weak, and tired, yet fear pushed him forward. The man's mind raced. He was not just chasing a thief anymore. He was chasing a secret. The child stumbled against a rock and almost fell, but kept running. His breath came fast and broken. He looked back once, his large, glowing eyes wide with panic. For a moment, their eyes met the man's steady and determined. The child's full of fear. Then the child disappeared again into the twisting passages. The man pushed harder. The cave narrowed, forcing him to crouch. His torch scraped against the walls, sparks flying. The walls were carved with strange patterns, lines, and symbols, old and forgotten. He had no time to study them. His eyes were fixed on the path ahead. The sound of running feet echoed again. The child was close. The man followed through a tunnel that sloped downward, deeper into the earth. His lungs burned, but he did not stop. The chase was more than just survival now. He had to know. Why was a child alone on this dead planet? Why did he steal food? And who was that weak voice in the dark? The ground grew uneven, sharp stones cutting at his boots. He stumbled once, caught himself, and kept going. His torchlight caught another glimpse of the child, a flash of pale skin, a shadow of thin arms. The child was slowing down. The man could feel it. The boy was weak, hungry, desperate. But then something strange happened. The child stopped. For just a moment, he stood still at the edge of a wide chamber inside the cave. He turned his head, his eyes glowing faintly in the torchlight. He stared at the man, not with anger, but with something else. Sadness. Then, without warning, the child ran again, this time faster, vanishing into a small passage at the far end. The man stepped into the chamber and froze. The room was massive, its ceiling high and dripping with water. The walls were covered with strange glowing vines, pulsing with a soft light. Old ruins stood here, broken stone pillars carved with alien symbols. This place was not just a cave, it was something ancient. But the child was gone. The man searched. Quickly, his torch revealed another narrow tunnel, small enough only for the child to squeeze through. Without thinking, he forced himself inside, scraping his shoulders against the stone. His light flickered, shadows stretching like long fingers across the walls. The air grew colder. The tunnel bent sharply, then opened into another chamber. And there he saw the child again. This time, the alien was not running. He was kneeling beside someone lying on the ground. The man's breath caught in his chest. His torchlight revealed the truth. It was a woman. Alien, thin, weak, her skin pale and cracked like dry earth. She lay against the wall, her chest rising. Slowly, painfully. Her eyes half opened, glowing faintly in the dark. The child placed the stolen food beside her, his hands trembling. The man stood in the shadows, frozen. This was no thief's den. This was a place of survival. The child had not stolen for himself. He had stolen for his mother. The woman coughed, her voice weak and broken. The sound echoed through the chamber, filling it with sorrow. The child touched her arm gently, his own eyes full of tears. The man lowered his torch, his anger fading. What he saw was no enemy, no danger. It was a family, broken and starving, holding on to life by a thread. For the first time, the man felt something shift inside him. This was not about food anymore. This was about survival, about a bond stronger than fear. But the woman's eyes, weak and glowing, turned toward him. She had seen him. The silence broke. The man stood in the light of his torch, his face caught. Between choice and fear. The child stared at him, his body shaking, ready to defend his mother even with no strength left. The moment hung in the air like a blade. The chase was over, but the story had just begun. The man stood at the edge of the chamber, his torchlight trembling in his hand. The glow touched the alien child first, small, thin, shaking, his wide eyes filled with fear. Then the light spread to the figure lying against the wall. The woman, her body was frail, her skin cracked like dried earth, glowing faintly in patches. Her chest rose and fell slowly, each breath a struggle. She was alive, but barely. Her hands were thin, her bones sharp under the pale skin. She looked like someone who had carried too much pain for too long. The child pressed a piece of stolen food into her hand. His tiny fingers shook as he helped her lift it to her mouth. She tried to bite, but her strength was weak. Her lips trembled. The food slipped from her hand and fell to the ground. The boy gasped softly, his glowing eyes filling with tears. He picked it up quickly and tried again, whispering in a voice too soft for the man to understand. The man froze. His heart pounded. In his chest, this was no enemy. This was no threat. This was a family on the edge of death. But the woman's eyes moved. Slowly, painfully, they opened wider. They found the man. For a moment, silence filled the chamber. The fire from his torch cast long shadows on the walls. Drops of water echoed as they fell from the ceiling. The woman's lips parted. Her voice came out like a broken wind. A sound, weak but filled with warning. The child turned instantly, his thin body moving in front of her, arms spread out as if to protect her. His eyes locked on the man, bright, glowing, fierce. He was scared. But more than that, he was ready to fight. The man felt a pull inside his chest. He had chased this child for food, but now he saw the truth. The food was not for the boy at all. It was for the mother. He raised his free hand slowly, palm open, showing he carried no weapon. His voice came out calm, low. "I will not hurt you." The child did not understand the words, but he understood the gesture. Still, his body stayed tense. Ready to shield his mother, the man lowered his torch slightly, letting the chamber fall into softer light. He could see them more clearly now, the boy's face, tired and hungry, and the mother's eyes, glowing faintly with pain and strength mixed together. She tried to move again, tried to lift herself up, but her body failed. She coughed, and the sound echoed through the stone walls. The boy held her arm gently, whispering again, his voice shaking. The man's throat felt dry. He looked at the food in her hand, then at the thinness of their bodies. They were starving. He could see it in every bone, every shadow of their figures. He reached slowly into his own bag. The boy's eyes widened. His body stiffened. The man paused, then pulled out another piece of food. He set it on the ground in front of him. Then he stepped back, his hands raised again. The boy blinked. His eyes shifted from the man to the food. His small chest rose and fell quickly. For a long moment, he did not move. Then, slowly, carefully, he stepped forward. His tiny fingers grabbed the food, clutching it tightly. He turned back to his mother and placed it near her lips. The woman tried again. This time, she bit into it weakly. A tear slid down the boy's face. The man watched in silence. His heart felt heavy. This was not just survival. This was love. A child fighting against death itself to keep his mother alive. The woman's eyes lifted once more. She looked at the man. This time, there was less fear in them. Still weak, still guarded. But something else was there too. A question, why was he here? What did he want? The man stepped no closer. He knew trust could not be forced. He stood still, his torch casting a dim circle of light, his hand still open. The boy fed his mother slowly, piece by piece, until she closed. Her eyes again, breathing heavy but calmer. He stayed by her side, holding her hand tightly. His head resting against her arm. The man lowered himself to the ground, sitting on a broken stone. He kept his distance, but he did not leave. His eyes stayed on them, watching, thinking. For the first time since he landed on this planet, he felt something stir inside him. Not fear, not anger, but something softer. This planet was supposed to be dead, empty, silent. Yet here, hidden in the dark, life clung stubbornly to hope. A mother and her child, refusing to give up. The silence stretched, but it was no longer heavy with danger. It was heavy with questions. Who were they? Why were they here? What had happened to their world? The man did not know yet. But one thing was certain, his journey had changed. He had come here for survival. Now, he had found something far more important. The torchlight flickered. The cave grew darker. And somewhere, deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. Of the truth, the cave chamber was silent except for the slow breathing of the alien mother and the faint crackle of the man's torch. Shadows stretched long across the stone walls, like silent watchers. The man sat still on a broken slab of rock, his back against the wall, his eyes fixed on the pair before him. The child had not moved far from his mother. He sat close, his thin arms wrapped tightly around her. His glowing eyes stayed locked on the man, never blinking for long. Even as exhaustion weighed heavy on his body, he refused to lower his guard. The mother stirred again. Her breath rattled, shallow and weak, but she opened her eyes once more. The glow inside them flickered faintly, like the last light of a dying star. She lifted her head slightly, her gaze falling on the man. Her lips parted. A sound escaped low, broken, like a whisper carried by the wind. The words were alien, their meaning lost to him, but the tone was clear. Warning. The child's body tensed at once. He shifted, placing himself even more firmly between his mother and the man. His small hands curled into fists, though they trembled. With weakness, he was ready to fight if he had to. The man raised one hand slowly, palm open. "Peace," he said quietly, though he knew they would not understand. Still, the child hesitated. His breathing was fast, uneven. His glowing eyes darted between the man's face and the food bag that hung at his side. Hunger burned in those eyes, but mistrust burned even brighter. The man's mind weighed heavy with thought. His supplies were small, barely enough for himself. Yet what kind of man would watch a child and his dying mother starve in front of him? Survival had always been a lonely struggle, but in this moment, loneliness felt cruel. He reached into his bag again, slow, careful. The boy flinched, his body stiff but did not move. The man pulled out another piece of food. This time, he set it on the ground halfway between them. He did not push it closer. He leaned back, his torchlight flickering across his tired face. The child looked at it. His body trembled, torn between mistrust and need. His mother coughed again, a sound that shook the silence. She weakly reached for him, her thin hand falling short. The boy could not resist any more. He crawled forward, every movement cautious, his glowing eyes still locked on the man. He grabbed the food quickly, almost like a thief in the night, and retreated back to his mother. The man did not move. He only watched the boy press the food to his mother's lips. She tried to eat, though her strength was failing. Her jaw moved slowly, painfully. Each bite seemed to cost her as much energy as walking a mile. Still, she ate. The boy's face softened with relief. For the first time, the hardness in his eyes melted, just a little. The man leaned forward slightly, his voice calm. "I mean no harm." The words echoed softly, though meaningless to them. But his tone, his body language, those were universal. The mother's eyes met his again. She did not speak this time. She only watched him, her gaze sharp but slower, less filled with fear. Time passed in silence. The dripping of water filled the chamber, and the torch's flame hissed faintly. The man's stomach growled, reminding him of his own hunger. He ignored it. The tension did not fade. It stretched between them like a tight rope, ready to snap with the smallest wrong move. The boy leaned against his mother at last, exhaustion winning over fear. His small body trembled with fatigue, his eyes half closing, though he tried to stay awake. The man's gaze softened. He saw not a thief, not a threat, but a child, one who had carried a burden too heavy for his tiny shoulders. He sighed quietly. Lowering the torch, the chamber grew darker, shadows swallowing the light. But even in the dimness, he could see them. Two fragile lives clinging to each other, fighting against the weight of a dying world. The man's thoughts grew heavy. Questions filled his mind. What had destroyed this planet? Why were they still here, alone, hidden in the ruins? Were there more like them, or were they truly the last? The mother shifted slightly, her eyes closing again, her hand resting weakly. Against the boy's head, her chest rose and fell in uneven rhythm. The man felt the urge to speak again, though he knew his words were useless. He whispered anyway, his voice low, almost like a promise to himself. "I will not leave you." The boy stirred at the sound, his eyes opening again, sharp and alert. He did not understand the words, but something in the man's voice made him pause. His body relaxed only slightly, as if his heart wanted to believe, even while his mind warned him not to. The man leaned back against the wall, staring at the ceiling of stone above. The glow of the vines pulsed faintly, giving the chamber a strange, dreamlike light. His own eyelids grew heavy, but he forced them open. He dared not sleep. Not yet. The air grew colder. The silence deepened. And though no words were shared, something invisible passed between them. Not trust, not yet, but a thread. Thin, fragile, almost invisible but real. The man knew the hardest part was still ahead. Earning trust, keeping them alive. Choosing between his own survival and theirs. The torchlight burned low, shadows creeping closer. The boy's eyes stayed on him, watchful to the end. In the stillness of the cave, tension hung like a blade between them all, and the night was far from over. The night stretched on inside the cave. The man sat with his back against the cold stone, his torchlight burning low, its flame shrinking with every passing hour. Across from him, the alien child had not moved far from his mother. His body leaned against her weak frame, his small hand gripping her thin arm as if letting go meant losing her forever. The man's eyes stayed on them. He'd faced storms, hunger, and loneliness before, but never had he seen a bond like this so fragile, so desperate, yet so powerful. The child was no fighter, no warrior, yet he had stolen food, risked danger, carried the weight of survival on shoulders far too small. The mother stirred faintly, her breath uneven. The boy whispered softly. To her words, the man could not understand. His glowing eyes reflected the dim light, full of sorrow and love. He broke off tiny pieces of food, pressing them carefully against her lips. The man lowered his gaze. His stomach ached with hunger, but he felt no anger. Instead, a question grew inside him. Why did he care? This was not his fight. He was a traveler, alone in a dead world. Survival meant holding on to what little he had. Yet, here he was, giving away food to strangers who did not even share his language. The boy glanced at him suddenly, his eyes sharp. Their gazes locked. For a long moment, nothing moved. The boy's body trembled, his chest rising quickly, but he did not look away. The man raised his hand slowly. His palm opened again, empty, gentle. No weapons, no threat. Only a simple gesture. Of peace, the boy blinked, his thin body still tense. Then, to the man's surprise, he did something new. He lifted his own small hand, just slightly, almost like a mirror. His fingers curled, then opened again, uncertain but trying. The man's heart gave a quiet jolt. A connection, small, fragile, but real. The mother coughed weakly, breaking the moment. The boy turned back to her at once, his protective shield returning. He whispered again in his strange tongue, his voice soft but urgent. The man reached into his bag once more. His fingers closed around a small water flask. He hesitated, his own thirst burned inside him. But when he looked at the mother, her lips cracked, her breathing harsh. The choice became clear. He placed the flask on the ground between them, pushing it forward gently. Then he leaned back again. The boy looked at it, his glowing eyes wide. He waited, suspicious, but the sound of his mother's cough grew worse. Finally, he reached forward, grabbed the flask, and hurried back to her side. He lifted it carefully, pressing it to her lips. She drank only a little, but even that seemed to ease her pain. Her chest rose more slowly now, less jagged, more steady. The boy's face softened. His eyes glistened, not with anger this time, but with relief. The man watched, silent, his chest tight with something he had not felt in a long time. Not fear, not loneliness, but purpose. Minutes stretched into hours. The torch burned lower still. Shadows crept closer, swallowing the corners of the chamber. The man's head grew heavy, his eyes weary, but he forced himself to stay awake. The boy glanced at him again, less harshly this time. His shoulders still tense, but not as much. His gaze lingered longer before turning back to his mother. Slowly, carefully, the man reached into his pack once more. This time, he pulled out something smaller piece of cloth. He tore it into strips, his hands steady. Then, without a word, he set the strips on the ground where the boy could see. The boy stared at them, confused. The man lifted one piece of cloth and wrapped it around his own hand, miming a bandage. Then he pointed softly toward the mother's arm. where her skin was cracked and bleeding faintly. The boy's eyes widened with understanding. He hesitated, then reached forward. His tiny hands grabbed the cloth and brought it back to his mother. His movements were clumsy but careful as he tried to copy what he had seen. The man did not interfere. He only watched, guiding with a nod when the boy looked uncertain. When the bandage was tied, uneven but firm, the boy looked back at the man. For the first time, his eyes were not filled with fear. They were filled with something else. Something like trust. The man nodded once, slow and steady. The boy blinked, then lowered his head, resting again beside his mother. The cave grew quieter. The mother's breathing was weak, but steadier now. The boy's eyelids drooped, heavy with exhaustion. At last, his body gave in. He curled against her side, his small hands still gripping her arm, and closed his eyes. The man stayed awake, keeping watch. He listened to the soft rhythm of their breaths, the drip of water, the hiss of the dying torch. His own hunger and thirst gnawed at him, but his mind was elsewhere. Something had changed tonight. He had begun the chase for stolen food. But here, in the heart of a dying cave, he had found something greater. A bond between mother and child that reached across the divide of species. A connection that needed no language. As the last flame of the torch flickered, the man whispered into the darkness, his voice barely a breath. "You're not alone anymore." The words vanished into the stone, unheard. But perhaps, in some way, they were felt. The night ended, not with fear, but with a fragile thread of hope. The cave was silent, except for the slow, steady breaths of the sleeping child. His small body lay curled against his mother, his arms still, clinging to her thin frame as if even in dreams he feared she might vanish. The man sat nearby, his back against the wall, eyes half closed, but alert. He had not slept. He did not dare. The night was long, and though the torch had burned out hours ago, the faint glow of the alien vines still lit the chamber in a ghostly green. Then, a sound broke the silence. A cough, weak, raspy, but sharp enough to echo in the stone chamber. The mother's eyes opened slowly, glowing faintly. She shifted, wincing with pain, and her hand moved weakly over her son's head. He stirred, but did not wake. The man leaned forward slightly. His instincts pulled him to help, but he stayed still. Any sudden move could shatter the fragile thread of trust they had built. The mother's eyes found him in the dim light. They lingered on him, tired but sharp. She studied him as though weighing his soul. Then, with effort, she moved her hand. She pointed first to her son, then to herself. Her lips parted. The words came broken, strange, not of his tongue. But even without meaning, the sound carried weight. The man nodded slowly, as if to say, "I see you. I understand." She tried again. Her hand moved weakly, tracing shapes in the air. A circle, then two lines crossing. She coughed, the motion breaking her strength. The man frowned, watching carefully. She repeated the motion, slower this time, her glowing eyes locked on his. The circle, the cross. Then her hand dropped against her chest. He pieced it together, not fully, but enough. A world broken. The man leaned closer, careful, his voice low and steady. "Your home, destroyed." She did not know the words, but something in his tone made her blink slowly, almost like a nod. Her hand trembled again as she gestured. She raised her palm upward, then spread her fingers wide, miming an explosion. She coughed again, her voice rough but filled with sorrow. The man's heart sank. He understood now. Not a famine, not a sickness, a disaster. Or something far worse. The mother's eyes glistened faintly in the dim glow. She pointed to the ceiling of the cave, to the stars beyond stone and sky. Her lips moved again. The sound, almost a whisper. A single word, repeated, broken, but Heavy did not know the meaning, but he felt it. A name. A memory. Perhaps the name of her world door. The name of what destroyed it. The child stirred at the sound of her voice, his small hand tightening on her arm. His eyes opened halfway, glowing dimly. He murmured in their tongue, soft and weak, before drifting back into sleep. The man's throat tightened. This child, this boy, had carried the weight of survival for them both. Alone, hiding in shadows. Stealing scraps, clinging to life while their world lay in ruins. The mother's breathing grew uneven again. She tried to lift her hand, but failed. Her body trembled, her strength slipping like water through her fingers. The man moved without thinking this time. He took the cloth he had left before, dipped it in the damp water dripping from the ceiling, and pressed it gently to her lips. She drank only a drop, but her breathing steadied for a moment. Her glowing eyes softened. She looked at him not with suspicion now, but with something else, something quieter. Gratitude. Her lips moved again, forming another word. Broken, slow. But this time he understood. Safe. The man's chest tightened. He did not know if she asked or if she begged. "Okay," he answered anyway. "Yes," he whispered, his voice steady. "You are safe." She closed her eyes for a moment, her body relaxing slightly. The boy shifted in. His sleep, his small head resting more heavily against her side. The man sat back slowly, his mind heavy with what he had learned. This planet had not always been dead. Once it had been alive with people, families, lives worth protecting. Now it was dust and ruins, with only 2 fragile survivors left behind. The vines pulsed softly in the dark, glowing like veins of life. Inside stone, the silence stretched again, but it felt different now. Not empty, not hostile, but sacred. The man lowered his head, whispering to himself as much as to them, "I will not let this end here." The mother's eyes opened faintly. At the sound, she looked at him one last time, weak but clear, and her lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile. Then she rested back, her body giving in to exhaustion once more. The boy's hand still clung to her arm, refusing to let go even in sleep. The man sat in silence, his heart heavy, but his purpose stronger than ever. He had come here chasing a thief. He had found the last survivors of a fallen world, and now he knew his choices would decide if their story ended in this cave, or if it carried on into the stars. The cave was quiet. Too quiet. The child slept against his mother, his small fingers locked tightly around her arm. His breathing was shallow but steady. The mother lay still, her chest rising slowly, every breath heavy with pain. Her glowing eyes were closed, her strength almost gone. The man sat in the darkness, watching. His own body was weak now. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, thirst dried his throat, and the weight of exhaustion pressed down on his shoulders. He had only a little food left, enough to survive a few days if he kept it for himself. But as his eyes lingered on the mother and child, the question tore through him. Was survival enough if he chose it alone? He leaned forward, his hands pressed together, his mind restless. He thought of his own journey, days of silence, nights under endless stars, walking across ruins of a world that felt empty. He had believed he was the last living soul here, but he was wrong. They were the last too. And now their fate lay in his hands. The mother stirred, coughing weakly. Her eyes opened halfway, dim with pain. She tried to lift her head, but failed. Her lips moved, no sound at first, then a broken whisper. The man leaned closer. He could not understand her words, but he felt the meaning in her tone. Plea. The child woke at her voice. His glowing eyes flickered open, wide with fear. He sat up quickly, his small body shaking as he looked at her, then at the man. He pressed his face against her side, as if afraid she might vanish if he let go. The man's chest tightened. This was no longer about stolen food. It was about life and death. About love. About what it meant to be human. He reached into his bag again. His fingers brushed the last of his rations. Bread, dry, but still edible. His hand froze. If he gave it, he might not last long. If he kept it, they would not last at all. He looked at the boy. Thin arms, hollow cheeks, eyes glowing with both fear and hope. A child who had fought against the impossible just to keep his mother alive. The man's hand trembled. Slowly, he pulled out the bread. He placed it on the ground in front of them. Then, without a word, he pushed the bag aside. The boy's eyes widened. He looked from the food to the man, confused. The man spoke softly, though he knew they could not understand. "It's yours. All of it." The boy hesitated, fear and hope battling inside him. Then he reached out, grabbed the bread, and held it tightly. He broke it into pieces with his trembling hands and pressed it against his mother's lips. She ate slowly, weak but alive. The man leaned back, his body sinking against the wall. His stomach twisted with hunger, but his chest felt lighter. He had made his choice. The mother's eyes lifted once more. They met his, glowing faintly, softer than before. Gratitude shone in them, fragile but clear. She whispered again, the same broken word she had spoken before. Safe. The man's throat tightened. He gave a slow nod. Yes, safe. The boy's eyes shifted too. For the first time, his gaze held no fear. Only trust, silence, filled the chamber again. But it was no longer heavy. It was alive. The man looked at the glowing vines on the walls, the strange ruins carved into stone. This world had fallen, but here, in this cave, something still lived. Something worth protecting. He thought of the stars beyond the sky. Somewhere out there, other people human, or not, still fought to survive. Perhaps he could find them. Perhaps he could carry this child and his mother to safety. Or perhaps it was already too late. The choice stood before him like a forked path. Leave them, and he would live, lone, empty, with their faces haunting him forever. Stay, and he might die, but together. Maybe, just maybe, they could find a way out of this dying world. He closed his eyes for a moment. Then he whispered, not to himself, but to them, "I will not leave you." The boy stirred at the sound. His glowing eyes locked on the man's face. He tilted his head slightly, almost as if he understood. His small lips parted. For the first time, he spoke not to his mother, but to the man. A single word. Broken. Strange, but familiar enough to freeze the man's breath. Stay. The word echoed through the chamber, small but powerful. The man's chest tightened. He nodded once, firm and steady. "I'll stay." The boy's eyes softened. He turned back to his mother, resting against her once more. Her breathing was weak but calmer now. The man sat in the silence of the cave, the vines glowing softly around them. His stomach ached, his body tired. But his heart was stronger than ever. He had come here as a wanderer, alone, empty, but now, in this dying world, he had found something worth fighting for. The choice was made, and the story of their survival was only beginning.